Howdy, howdy. Welcome to Talking Synths number 84. Whew. We're here with an Ensoniq Mirage, one of my favorite keyboards. I'm Sam.
I'm Carlos.
And we're from Syntaur. And Syntaur is, of course, the place to get any synthesizer parts you need. And sometimes we talk synths about synths, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk some synths about synths about the Ensoniq Mirage. First, any upcoming news? What should we throw up in the front of this show? We're about to go to NAMM, so that's coming up. Real busy time.
Do you know when that begins?
June 3, 4, and 5.
And that's what, a 2-day drive from Texas?
Yeah, 2 days really pedal to the metal. Yeah, it ought to be 3 days, but if you're crazy enough, it's 2. So it's Lucas and I going, and Mary, and we'll be doing a lot of filming for upcoming stuff. Synth Wizards episode 12 we're wrapping up, and we've got a little bit of stuff to do there, but mostly filming for our Ensoniq documentary, which is suddenly rolling full steam ahead and taking up lots of our attention. So it's a really busy time, but it's exciting to get out there and get this stuff happening. And with the Ensoniq documentary, we've been doing a lot of talking about the Mirage and talking to other people about the Mirage, among other things. And so I thought it'd be cool. No, you thought it'd be cool. One of us thought it'd be cool to have the Mirage up here for a Talking Synths episode, because it's such a quirky, weird, different keyboard. And boy, it was groundbreaking back in the day, because suddenly digital sampling was affordable to the masses. At the time, 1984, late 84, I guess this came out.
Is that the same number as this episode?
Ooh.
I was just thinking that when you did the introduction.
Yeah, so in 84 it came out, and at the time you could get a digital sampler, but it was either a Fairlight, a Synclav, or an emulator.
1 or 2?
2, I think, was out at the time, maybe. But the emulator was the cheapest alternative. $8,000 in 1984 dollars. So I think that equated to the price of a car back then, a compact car, brand new. So a lot of money to get a digital sampler. That was the cheapest option, and then you could spend $32,000 up on a Fairlight, or I can't remember which went where, but anywhere from $32,000 up into the hundreds of thousands for the complete system.
And a fully loaded Synclavier costs you about the price of a house.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just crazy expensive to do it. Anyway, the bottom line is you had to be a really successful musician back then to have a digital sampler. And then Ensoniq came out with the Mirage, bam! Even I could afford one. And $1,700 when they came out, and you could sample the dog barking and frying pans hitting and anything that made noise. You could sample it, and it was cool and it was fun.
Well, and I think one other advantage of the Mirage over the other samplers you just listed was just the portability factor.
Oh yeah.
You know, the emulator too it's a wonderful instrument, but if you've ever seen one in person, they're very large.
Yeah.
Whereas the Mirage, I feel like you could tuck it underneath your arm. And
indeed you could. And well, the emulator was very portable compared to the Fairlight and the Synclav, which had boxes of different things, and computer box, and then the keyboard, and then
the cabling. And,
lots of accoutrements.
Oh, and then the other big revolutionary aspect of it, the storage.
Yeah.
The floppy.
Well, the emulator used floppies.
But the floppy.
The ones that are really floppy.
Yeah, the 5 1/4.
Yeah. And so, 3.5-inch discs for this. It used single density, single-sided discs, which are long out of production now, but you can sort of cheat a high-density disc into working on a Mirage. But yeah, it's it's a keyboard that you can hate and love at the same time, the Mirage is, because you can do all this complicated stuff, and it's all on a 2-digit
hexadecimal display.
7-segment display, yeah, in hexadecimal. So if you want to change the filter setting, for instance, you pull up your manual or your parameter reference card, which I looked for a minute and I couldn't find one, but you would find, all right, what parameter controls the filter, and sampling, interfacing.
And imagine doing all this on stage.
It is a lot easier when you have that parameter reference card, but I mean, I guess I should have looked up something like this beforehand, but it's a little cumbersome.
So with the alpha numeric, or with just the numeric display, I guess you can't really do like a real-time filter sweep, huh?
Right. You'd have to set it to the right parameter number, and then you'd have to click value, and then it would show the value of the filter, and to sweep you would increment or decrement the buttons. Yeah. But the really cool thing about the Mirage, digital sampler, so your waveforms are digital, but then they're sent through analog filters and analog VCA. And what are the filters in here, do you know?
It's a CEM3328, and then there's a couple, it's also, should be noted there's a couple of different revisions of Mirage, as far as what the DSK1, DSK8, rack mount.
Right. Two DSK8 versions. Yeah.
And so the later revisions will actually have a CEM3360 as the final VCA, as opposed to some of the early revisions that use a different chip.
Yeah. So these are analog synthesizer chips, and with the CEM filters, you get a really distinctive sound. It's really a good sound. I like it. But it's a neat, unique combination of really crunchy, gritty samples that are real recordings, but yet they're different. Like if you record a choir, for instance, you can tell it's a choir, but at the same time it's gritty and edgy and kind of more haunting, and got a really unique sound to it. And then you run that through the analog filter, and you can make it dark sounding and a little resonance, and it's just a really neat combination. But yeah, with this display, it's cumbersome to use. So Syntaur started out on a Mirage, and the first product we did was making sound discs for the Mirage. I have one of them here. I guess we ought to play this sound while we're up. This is one you liked. This was a Chroma sample. That's a pretty straight. It's not a good example of gritty, nasty. It is a good example. It
kind of shows you the flexibility.
Exactly. It is a good example of the Mirage can do certain types of sounds really pretty accurately and been pretty nice. And there's a string ensemble sound that was one of the factory discs, and I'm to this day floored that the sound engineers at Ensoniq, I think Tom Metcalf was the guy that did most of this, sampled an orchestral string section, got such a clean sample into the Mirage, looped it to where it sounds decent, and I mean it's mind-boggling how difficult that is and what a good job they did.
So maybe if you play one of the higher notes, just a single key, the people at home can kind of hear what you talk about when we say looping.
If you listen real close, you can hear a little blip there, but as you go up higher,
it becomes much more apparent.
Yeah. And the crazy thing on this is, let's say you sample you want to sample a piano, and you're sampling a certain note, and to loop it, you want to get you want to get your zero crossings to match, where the waveform is like it's going up and then it's coming down, and here's a zero crossing, and then here's your loop point, and you want to move that to where the one sample going down exactly matches the other sample. Well, to do that, you might think that, well, we'll just slide this around like this. Well, no, this is a digital instrument, and it's only got so many increments that you can move because of the sample rate. So if you need to match this to this, you might start out with them far apart like this, and then you increment, and as you move them together, you find out that there's not a point where they match. So you cannot, by the laws of physics, get a good loop on that. So what do? Well, you change the tuning of the piano to where the waveform has a different width, and you calculate, okay, if it's not working here, let's calculate how much we need to tune the key flatter or sharper to make that loop point work out. And that's the kind of stuff they did. It's just mind-boggling to me. I can see spending a month getting a good piano note. Easily. And then you want to multi-sample and stuff. And so it's, oh man, it's a huge amount of work. But on the other hand, you could sample a drum sound where you don't have to loop, or you could sample China plate smashing, or you
gunshot.
Or you could sample smacking something with a piece of wood and making that into a snare drum sound. And that kind of stuff was relatively easy. And because of the structure, the sonic structure of the Mirage, it did have a unique sound. I said I was gonna load. Okay, Mirage Disc 1. This is the very first product that Syntaur ever made. Mini Moog bass and VFX breathy flute are on the first sound bank. Let's load those up and hope the disc still works.
You get an astonishing, what is it, 3 sounds? Three
you
banks?
You got 3 locations on the disc. Each has an upper and a lower. So here's the Mini Moog bass. Let's see how that loop is. Not too bad. And VFX breathy flute. So this is a breathy flute program on the VFX that I sampled.
You can hear
you can tell where it loops. All right, let's play the highest note and bear all. It's not bad for a Mirage. All right. There's the split point, of course. What else was on here? DX7 bass, VFX funk guitar.
And I think Mirage is one of those instruments, I didn't realize how iconic or just how much it had been used in popular culture until I actually worked on one and kind of heard some of the percussion samples. And I was like, oh, okay, that snare, that crunch, I've heard that on so many records.
God, I have one of my favorite crunchy drum sounds here now that you mention it. I don't know where this came from. The cool thing about the Mirage is there was such a culture around it, and everyone would make sounds and then they'd swap them around, and you could get like cartoon hits and all kind of stuff from sources that were copyrighted to people that made their own stuff, and it was cool. And I don't know where this came from, but these are really nice, crunchy drum sounds. I just love the crunchiness of it. And how things cut off so quickly, because you only have I think, a total of 2.1 seconds, if I remember right, of total sampling time across the whole keyboard. So if you're doing a drum kit with 12 different sounds, that's not much time for them. So you end up with, well, that's a long one, but. So that's some kind of simple sound, but you know, it's being lopped off pretty soon. It's just so edgy, and I like it. And so to do a bunch of sounds like that across the keyboard, you can do up to 16, and you would want to use the Mesos operating system, the Mirage Advanced Samplers Operating System, MASOS, and you would load this disc in, and sound 3 is 8 wave samples per half. So it gives you a template where you have 8 samples that you can put across the bottom half and 8 samples you can put across the top half. And it's, you know, it's cumbersome to do all this stuff, because like, okay, now I'm finished playing and I want to sample something, so let's reboot the Mirage with a different operating system that's set up for doing multi-sampling. And oh, now I need to save all this to a disk. Well, you can't just put a floppy disk in there. First, you got to format it. And so to do that, you use your Mirage formatting disk. You turn the Mirage off again, losing all the work you just did because you didn't have a disk to sample to yet. And then you boot it up with the formatting disk. And then once that's booted up, then you put in a blank disk and tell the Mirage to format that. And then when that's done, you get the famous, I don't think I have it anywhere, but the Mirage will say, you play a note and it says, "This is a blank formatted diskette." and Voice was the receptionist at Ensoniq at the time. So. I love this sound. This one's kind of iconic. And this is brass sounds that were done on the Mirage. And you can see it takes 20 seconds or something to load each thing. So.
It's loading the upper and the lower.
So. And of course, as you go up or down the keyboard, the timing changes. So this brass fall off goes quick. And down here it goes. Takes a long time, but such a neat character. And then the other thing, there were so many orchestra hits and that kind of stuff. I think this is a really cool violin run. I'd love this sound, if it's a sound I'm thinking. It's been a long time since I've used all this. Oh man, we can have fun a long time with this. All right, here's another one. I just went through my box. So if you had a Mirage, you had a box full of discs, and the more discs you have, the more of a badass you were. So this is a disc that has memory moog strings on it.
Oh, this is a good. I like this one.
I love it too. It's such a. I don't remember how to describe it, but it's so nice. How's that?
Well, it just kind of once again shows you the versatility.
Someone made some really good samples with that.
Yeah.
And that's a really nice sound, and it always made me want to play a memory moog if I ever had the chance.
And so if I load that into an EPS, will it play just like that?
Sort of. The EPS will load in Mirage sounds and play them back with I was always a little confused about this because the Mirage is an 8-bit sampler. The EPS is a 13-bit sampler, which means, and I'm going to sound really smart when I say this, but it's because I just looked it up for the documentary. It means that with an 8-bit sampler, you have 256 levels where you can hit the amplitude of the sample. So you have 256 steps of accuracy. With the EPS, a 13-bit sampler, you have over 8,000. So it's a lot better fidelity. Over twice the, compared to a 12-bit sampler, the EPS was 13-bit, and that 1 bit gave it twice the sample accuracy and half the noise floor.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, you can load Mirage samples into the EPS. It translates them. It doesn't load them natively. It sort of goes through a translation process. And you lose some of the qualities of the Mirage. Well, for one thing, you lose the analog filters. So, okay, I'm going to load this. This is the sound of a slinky on the bottom and someone doing this on a wine glass on the top. These are great sounds. I really love them. And you drop that down an octave and it gets kind of creepy and, oh no, there it is. Okay, and down here it's a sample of someone doing this with a slinky. And then the wine goblet up here. Some cool stuff.
We need to work on archiving some of this stuff.
What you mean? It's right here.
Wait, floppies go bad, you know?
Well, we have all this on our computer that burns all this stuff. I thought these were really cool vocal samples too. Doos, and there's
It almost sounds like it has a little
bit.
bit of reverb on it, like when they sampled it.
That's from the, well, you're hearing a little bit of programming of envelope. Cool stuff. And the Mirage has a sequencer in it, which is pretty much useless because it's one track. You can't edit anything. You can't even, I mean, you can basically speed it up or speed it down, but it's, all right, turn it on, record some stuff, and hit stop, and then you can play that back. That's the total extent of the Mirage sequencer. But it was great for doing demos, and I thought Ensoniq did a really great job of doing demos for a lot of the sound discs they did. And I'm going to load up the first sound bank here, which is a bass clarinet and a clarinet on top. And now I've loaded the demo sequence. So the theme music from Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
So, such cool stuff. I was hoping to, let's load a couple of orchestra hits here. I didn't have time to go through this and search through all the sounds on all these discs, but somewhere I have like the orchestra hit that was used in Janet Jackson's Nasty, I think was the song. I'm not sure if one of these will be it. No, so I'd have to search for that, but I did want to bring up that Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam, who produced Janet Jackson's Control album, really went to town on a Mirage at that time, and they took stuff like those orchestra hits where they would, you know, do melodies and things with them, and that was real different at the time, and again, those orchestra hits weren't clean sounds. They were Mirage-y, gritty, edgy sounds, and that really came in vogue from a lot of their productions. And they also did cool stuff like, I can't remember the particulars offhand, but one of the songs from that album had a bass sound that was done from a car horn, and they dropped it down a couple of octaves or something, and did some enveloping, and it made a really unique bass sound. So the Mirage really speaks volumes about, here's an instrument that has a lot of limitations. The audio fidelity, if you're an audiophile, you would say, that thing is crap. And you'd be right as far as audio fidelity. But in, well, we did a recent interview with Dave Rossum of EMU, and he said that musicians have a knack for taking an instrument like this and playing on those limitations and playing on those parts of it where it's not perfect, but it's perfectly musical. So the Mirage is such a great example of that, and that makes it one of my favorites.
Yeah, and we didn't even touch on sound process, which is what a whole other operating system. I think Ensoniq.
And Leaping Lizards, you know that one?
Yeah, I was actually, if y'all ever get a chance to read Transonic Hacker, their PDFs are all online. They've been archived, but I was reading through some and I saw Leaping Lizards.
Yeah, and again, there was such a culture around the Mirage, and the people were fanatical about it, me being one of them, and you could, well, since the Mirage booted up from a floppy disk, you could, if you had the smarts, which apparently a couple of people did, you could make your own operating system. And so Sound Process was an alternate operating system for the Mirage, sold by a company that had nothing to do with Ensoniq. And it would boot up, and basically it would let you take little snippets of samples, save them as waveforms, and it basically made the Mirage into a wavetable synthesizer.
With
so
analog filters.
Exactly. So you'd program your sounds based on those little snippets of wave samples, and you could have 32 sounds. Is it 32? I think that's the right number. I may be incorrect to that. But you had a number of sounds that you could call up instantly. And with the Mirage, as you've seen, if we want to change sounds, well, okay, put the disc in, push a few buttons, hit load, and wait for 20 seconds or something, and then you got your sound. With Sound Process, you want the next sound, boop, 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 and you're there. And then you have 3 banks of sounds on a disc. So yeah, I think it was 32, and a whole disc would hold 3 banks of 96 sounds. And so, such cool stuff like that people just did because they wanted to and had the smarts to. And then Leaping Lizards was a SysX recorder. It basically turned the Mirage, again, it's an alternate operating system, so to use it, you turn the Mirage off, put in the Leaping Lizards disc, turn it on, and then your Mirage could save your program data from your Oberheim Matrix 6 or something like that. So it's crazy and wonderful, and I can't say enough about it. It's loads of fun in a 2-digit hexadecimal display.
No, I mean, and then once again, it just goes to show the versatility of the instrument. I think that really speaks volumes.
So, gosh, volumes. Here's the Advanced Sampler's Guide that tells you how to get into sampling, and it's got crazy stuff like hexadecimal and oh boy, all this kind of stuff. Input sampler frequency. So you select parameter 74, and then you can use the parameters to go up and down for the input sampling. And oh man, it's a lot to get into. But what more fun could you have with 2 digits and a hexadecimal display?
And I just had one quick service tip for Mirages, because there's a ton of them out there, and you see them more often than not on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. They generally pop up for they're still affordable vintage keyboards. Everyone knowing what the vintage market is these days. If you ever come across a Mirage that gets stuck on boot up, they tend to have there's a calibration process that happens when you insert the first disc and the filters are calibrating. If any of those filters chips, the CEM 3328s, have gone bad, you can get stuck on boot up for a very long time. So if you have a Mirage that's doing that, a good rule of thumb is to reseat and clean out the sockets for the filter chips. They're very easy to spot. They're on the right-hand side of the board.
Yeah, there's just basically one main board in there.
And when you open up a Mirage, there's really not a whole lot going on in there. But if you have a Mirage that's stuck on boot up, that's a great place to start diagnosing. And then, of course, the drive. With the bad drive, you're not going to be able to load the OS.
and it gets confusing because if your OS disk is bad, it's not going to boot up either. So you get stuck and you have this question, wait, is my disk bad or is the drive bad? I don't know. Find a friend who's got a good working Mirage or a good working disk, and that'll help you to clear that up. But yeah, what do Mirages sell for?
I've seen them for as cheap as $100 and as expensive as $6. And then, of course, going up into the 7 and 8s, if they have, you know, a SD card emulator, if they come fully loaded with the sample library, any extras will add to the value. There was a memory upgrade kit that was available for a short period of time.
That was for the sequencer, which is total. You got a useless sequencer, and then let's upgrade that to make it more useless.
The other thing that I see that's real hard to come by is the sample input filter. So,
that's useful. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you find a Mirage in good condition, because usually they've been toured, and they've kind of been beat to hell and back, with original, you know, owner's manuals, accessories, those are always going to add to the value. But, you know, they still pop up on Craigslist. You know, I've had this thing in my closet for the past 20 years. What do you give me for it?
Yeah. And the input sampler filter, by the way, is basically a brick wall filter. It just chops everything off over a certain frequency so that you can eliminate that aliasing as much as possible. Man, there's a lot to talk to about a Mirage. Oh, yeah. It may be that we talk some more about it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're almost always missing these screws. The little parts that hold it tend to break. That's really common. Doesn't affect the performance of it. Key bed, always a good idea to clean the key bed if it's been sitting for a while.
Yeah. Well, I guess we ought to wrap up, and maybe we'll come back to it next time or something. But yeah, the Ensoniq Mirage, really, really cool. And God, if you can get one for $100, do it.
Absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it.
Yeah, they just sound so great and so unique. All right. Well, I'm gonna. That's some really useful modulation.
Yeah.
But in any case, we'll grab the wheel and we'll modulate it.